Hello, everyone. Thank you for your patience. We will start our meeting in a minute now. So, hello, makers. My name is Abhay PA. I am an intern from MakerGraph. I will be your host for today's edition of MakerChat. Basically, MakerGram is an open community platform for makers and hardware enthusiasts to learn, share, and collaborate. This is our third edition of the weekly MakerChat webinar series. If you are joining for the first time, don't worry about it. All our previous MakerChat editions are available at our YouTube channel. You can subscribe and watch those. Uh, Without much delay, let me unbox our today's session. So today's topic will be about demystifying embedded development. It will be taken by Mr. Prashant. Let me give you a brief introduction. He's an embedded firmware engineer at Confident Electronic Private Limited based in Bangalore, and he's very passionate and active in maker communities. Completed his bachelor engineering in electronics and communication from Anna University. Today's section we will be focusing absolute basics of embedded system, so that all makers who wish to step into the world of embedded system development, it will be an introductory session. Before the session, I request all the attendees to turn off the video and mute the audio for uninterrupted learning experience. Once again, I thank you all for joining the webinar series. Now, over to you, Prashant.
Thank you, Abhay. Thank you for the great introduction. Let me see, we have a great crowd over here tonight. So today we'll be discussing on the subject, demystifying embedded development. So let me start with a small kind of history kind of thing. Okay. So before I joining the industry some 3 years back, even I was a maker. I mean, I've been trying to develop products of my own using platforms like Arduino, Raspberry Pi, ESP8266, such kind of stuff. And I learned electronics through open source things, right? So before joining the industry, I was very passionate about making these things open source and making it available to the community. But one thing that I have noticed so far is that people are lagging behind when it comes to making things from the scratch. I mean, a lot of people are depending upon the communities, libraries, and all this open source stuff that are readily available to them. Most people that I have seen is they're most of like script kiddies building the final product from the blocks of open source stuff that is available in the internet. And what I have noticed is a lot of people have the passion to build products of their own, and we have seen a lot of makers in India are developing products of their own, which has been, that has been useful in various situations in our country. Take the case of the COVID-19. A lot of people are coming at with products such as ventilators, 3D printed masks, and all this kind of stuff. But most of them are struggling to get it out to the market as a product. So today we are going to break down this wall between the makers and the actual market. So we are going to learn stuff or two about the actual product development and understanding the embedded development much deeper than the actual maker culture. So I want you to learn everything from the scratch. I mean, by the end of the session, you guys will be able to make a product, or even you guys will be able to understand the working process of a microcontroller or an embedded system from the scratch at the fundamental level. So without further ado, let me give you a small introduction about the agenda of today's webinar. So today we'll be first discussing about the topic called Beyond Arduino. I mean, I will be discussing about the need of going beyond Arduino and why shouldn't people stick to Arduino more than a little bit of what you call stages in their learning curve actually. When I will explain you why Arduino will will give you a head start, but it is not a good idea in a longer run. And after that, we'll explore the semiconductor industry in today's world. We'll explore the available options in the semiconductor industry. I'll acquaint you for some of the companies available and their products. And after that, I'll give you an introduction about embedded system and how they are being worked and all those kind of things. I'm getting audio. Please feedback to me. Is my audio clear? I mean, I'm getting some messages that this audio is not clear. Please give me a feedback. Hello?
Yeah, your audio is clear.
All right, okay. I'm getting so many feedbacks that it's all okay. Fine. So,
Prashant, can you
yeah.
speak little louder or close to mic?
How about now?
It's better.
Yeah, fine. Thank you. I think it's fine right now. I mean, I was having some network issues. All right. So first of all, I think I came up to the second topic. Okay, fine. So then I'll give you an introduction to embedded system, the basic MCU architecture, and what you need to know about the basics of microcontrollers and what are the things that is going inside a microcontroller, like the microcontroller peripherals and all those kind of stuff. And later we'll talk about some communication protocol. We'll get to know how microcontrollers communicate with each other, how does inter-IC communication work, and all those kind of stuff. I mean, I've seen a lot of people doing a lot of YouTube videos like interfacing sensors to microcontrollers and Arduino boards, but I've seen most of them are struggling to actually understand the way these things are being communicating with each other. A lot of people are just giving, what do you call it? A lot of people are just making uh, videos about actually using the libraries than explaining the real way of data transfer between the microcontroller and a peripheral device. So we'll be having a deep discussion about the communication protocols, and then finally we'll discuss about the available IDEs and development tools which can be used for embedded development. And at the end of the session, I'll give you a small demo on a bare metal blink on ARM Cortex-M. So we'll be using an ARM Cortex-M0 Plus based microcontroller, and I'll give you a demo on how to write a bare metal program to blink an LED without using any HAL, any library, or not even a single header file in your C code. So let's move on. Beyond Arduino, I know all of you guys are pretty much familiar with Arduino, and Arduino is no doubt the best microcontroller available for a beginner who is stepping into the embedded industry or even the maker community. Even I have started my journey with Arduino some few years back. But the thing is that in today's world, people are pretty much like they are being sticked onto the comfort zone that Arduino is providing them. A lot of people are like, what do you call, okay, I'm comfortable with developing with Arduino because all the libraries are readily available, all the code is readily available, and I don't have to develop anything of my own. I just have to do a few more modifications in this code and my product is done. So that's the mentality I've been seeing in a lot of people in the community, but that's not good actually. See, the thing is that when you get more comfortable with a method of development, it's actually destroying your learning curve. Actually, you should not do that, and that's a mistake that all the makers out there makes. I mean, especially in India, what I have seen is you can see even in the online communities like a Hackster or Instructables and all those kind of things. A lot of people have been what do you call? They're making their own libraries. They are making very innovative kind of products. And why don't we have such kind of a what do you call attitude among our people? I mean, we usually what we'll do is we'll just go to Instructables or Hackster or such kind of an online community. We'll find a good project. We'll take up the documentation. We'll download the code. We'll download the schematic diagram. We will buy the components. We put them all together. We dump the code. If it doesn't working, we'll send an email to the guy or we'll put some comments beyond the article so that we think that that guy may solve our issue. And once it is done and working, that's it. We forget it. We don't even try to understand what is going inside the product. So that is one mistake that most of the people in our country does actually. The reason why these people are not able to contribute much into the community like the people from other countries do. So this attitude has to change. We need to find out how things are really working under the hood. So that's why we are conducting this session in association with MakerGrant. We want you people to know how things are working under the hood. We want you to people know what's different, the foundation level aspects of an embedded system. And even when you're blinking an LED, I want you guys to know how this thing really blinks or how the code is being executed inside a microcontroller. So that is why we are, presenting this session right today in front of you. So that being said, I've told you guys to go beyond Arduino. So what are your other options? What option do we have? I mean, you have a plethora of options in front of you. I mean, there are a lot of semiconductor companies out there, each of them have their own specialized area or their own specialized product portfolio with them. Actually, I've not mentioned all of them over here. I've obviously taken out all the high-speed memory manufacturers from the semiconductor industry. I'm just talking about the people who are manufacturing microcontrollers and other components for the embedded industry. So looking into that, I'll just explain how each and every of this company is important in the industry. NXP right here, you know, is one of the pioneers in today's embedded industry, and they manufacture microcontrollers particularly for the automotive application. It's said that a modern car usually has maybe 1,000 to 1,500 microcontrollers on an average, and almost 50% of it will be manufactured by NXP. And NXP holds more than 15% of market share in today's automotive embedded electronics. So NXP's microcontrollers are mostly industrial grade and pretty much very much robust as far as I am concerned. And the next one I'm introducing to is the Freescale Semiconductor. They are now part of NXP. I mean, they have merged with NXP around in 2015, I guess, and they are also producing very good commercial grade microcontrollers. Next, we know about the Silicon Labs. They're also very good in their Cortex range of microcontrollers. We have Cypress, who are world leaders in capacitive touch sensors and world leaders in BLE-based modules or microcontrollers which have inbuilt BLE modules. So if your product or solution is going to have a feature of capacitive touch user interface, or if it is having a very good BLE kind of stuff, I always recommend you a microcontroller by Cypress. They are the best in that, and they have the best development environment for such a product kind of thing. And next we have the Evergreen Microchip. I'm pretty much sure that some of our participants are from Microchip, so they know more about their company. So Microchip, as you know, they are the big daddy of PIC microcontrollers. They have introduced PIC to us. PIC was pretty much the first microcontroller which most of us started with when we started with the embedded development. That was the first microcontroller which we have used. So Microchip, they are the father of PIC, and today they are the father of Arduino as well, because Atmel, who are the manufacturers of Atmega 328P, the most popular and favorite microcontrollers of all the makers, is now part of Microchip. So as you all know, Atmel is also the owner of AVR microcontrollers. They started the most popular AVR architecture, which has been also a favorite of makers and engineers all around the world from the late 1990s to 2000s. And then we have the Renesas Microelectronics. So Renesas is also a leader in automotive embedded electronics. So it is just behind NXP based on market share when it comes to automotive electronics. And then we have another community favorite, ST. ST Microelectronics, as you know, they are now making one of the best microcontrollers out there for the commercial electronics industry. You have the ST, most makers, who are just going beyond Arduino is now choosing ST as their next doorstep for getting into the world of embedded development, which is really a good choice. And their Nucleo series of development platforms are one of the best boards to start with for the embedded developers who wish to move from the usual Arduino platform and get into the ARM Cortex-based kind of microcontroller development environment. Next, we have the Infineon. Infineon is like next thing after NXP and Renesas in the automotive embedded embedded scene. Actually, they hold around 10% of the market in the automotive embedded industry. So they are one of the best if you are going for an automotive applications. Next, I don't want to explain more actually, each and everyone. These are just the top something, top 10 or something. And again, we have controllers companies like Newton, who are manufacturing very cost-effective microcontrollers, even with the ARM core inside, ARM Cortex core inside. So if you definitely want an ARM Cortex core in your product, and if you are so much concerned about the cost of your product, you can always go for a Newton microcontroller. So I'm not boring you anymore with the company history and all those kind of stuff. This is more than enough. So you know your options. So if you're going beyond Arduino, you have plenty of options in front of you. Choose your microcontroller based on your application, based on the features that you need. And all these companies are specialists in each of these areas. So choose wisely. So we'll move to the next session. So embedded systems. I heard this term embedded system when I was studying engineering initially, and I didn't have any idea what is embedded embedded systems as of now. And right now I'm working in a company who is specialized in embedded systems. It's a fact that there are more computers in this world than people are, right? We know we are surrounded by computers everywhere. I mean, just look at it. Even today, in a small light bulb, you will see a smart embedded system inside it. All these things are turning smart. Smart has become a keyword right now. I mean, people are more interested in appliances that are smart refrigerator, smart AC, smart bulb, right light bulb. Everything is turning smart. So what's inside it anyway? So it has an embedded system in it actually. So everything smart has an embedded system, I would say, in that way. If you are looking at this, or what turns a normal light bulb into a smart light bulb, it has a very intelligent embedded system right into it that makes it capable of what do you call transferring data or information or doing all those kind of things. I think I'm still not audible to some of the people. Is it okay right now?
Yeah,
Your voice is a little faint.
All right, all right. Is it better right now?
Yeah, it's better now.
Yeah. All right, fine. So we've been talking about embedded systems, right? So embedded systems or embedded computer design has now become so popular in the world so that each and every product can be transformed into their smart counterpart using an embedded system design. So if you people are interested in making an embedded system or making an embedded product, how would you want to move on? So you need to understand the basics of embedded system. So let's get to the basics. So this block diagram right here, I designed it keeping in mind that people are pretty much acquainted with the Arduino ecosystem. As you all know, your Arduino ecosystem, consider this thing, your embedded computer as your Arduino ecosystem. Your hardware is the actual Arduino board, and you will have a firmware or a software running inside it. You will have several input parameters like your switches, signals, and all those kind of stuff, and you will have some output parameters like relays, signals, and all those kind of stuff. You have a communication link. Suppose you have a serial monitor to display data in your computer. You will have a USB communication link. Okay, how's the voice right now? Hello?
it's clear. It's clear.
Yes,
Yeah,
yes, yes.
because I've been getting I've been getting a lot of feedback from people that it is not clear. I'm not sure whether it's a problem in my end or, yeah, it's fine then. So this is then overall layout of an embedded system compared to an Arduino ecosystem. You will have several input parameters like your switches and all those kind of stuff. You will have output parameters. You will have a communication link to transfer data between your system and an outer system, and you will definitely have a user interface, so which the users will use to communicate with your system. So this is pretty much very easy to understand and somewhat simple, but this is not the actual system. This is how an embedded system somehow looks like in its simplest form possible actually. You will have a microcontroller, and in it you will have the core processor, your memory will be there, there will be timers taking care of so many application periodic things. You will have communication ports to communicate with your peripherals, with your ICs, with your sensors and all those things. You will have interrupt controllers to control all the interrupts or periodic activities that is happening inside the microcontroller. You will have general purpose input outputs or so-called GPIOs to control your input output things. So and again, you will have a power reset and oscillator circuit for providing power to the circuit and the clock cycle for the microcontroller. You will have input interfacing or driver circuits for interfacing inputs into your microcontroller, giving proper isolation and all those kind of stuff. You will have the output interfacing circuits, which will provide isolation for the outputs and also for driving the outputs. You will have system application specific circuits. Suppose if you're driving a certain kind of sensor application or something, you will need to provide some kind of converter circuits, or you need to give amplifiers for the sensor to interface with your microcontroller. So this is the simplest layout that I can throw for an embedded system out there, and the minimum requirement for any embedded system out there. So again, what are the 7 steps to make your embedded product working? So it is pretty much simple. I mean, it's not just about embedded product. These are the 7 steps that are involved in almost in the development of any other product out there. So if you go, you first have to study the requirement. Suppose if you want to, I mean, a lot of people have been trying to make ventilators and all those kind of stuff for the COVID-19 scenario right now. And the first thing you have, I mean, most of the people are simply skipping the first part and they are just going to the second and third part, examining and designing. So they are not doing pretty much of the background study right now. So this is the part where most of the people skip the thing. So you have to study your requirement pretty much, and you have to study your customer requirement so hard that you will get to know the actual scope of the project, and you will get to know how to make that project the best way possible out there in the market. And being that I mean, the second step will be examining the hardware. Once you have studied the requirement of your customer and once you're pretty much clear with the technology that is required to drive your product, you have to examine the available hardware and software that is required to make your product, and you have to choose on the hardware, the software, and all the other parameters that are required to build your product. And the third step will be design. This is the stage that is going to take the longest time when it is considered in the product development process. So design, you have to be very careful while designing the product. You have to first design your hardware. You have to design your hardware in such a way that, you know, a product has to be, when you're, I mean, most of us are familiar with prototype development. I mean, all of the people are, you can make rapid prototypes with all these kits like Arduino, ready-made sensor shields and all those kind of stuff. And it is pretty much easy to build a prototype these days, but it is not the case when it comes to a product. You are talking about a product that is being deployed in the real market, and it has to be rugged enough to sustain in the real market. So think about a product that is going inside a vehicle. That product should be able to withstand vibration. It should be able to withstand rapid voltage changes that is happening from the voltage, I mean, the power supply in the vehicle. And these kind of real world scenarios makes an actual product different from your prototype. All of us again make prototype using this rapid prototype development kits that is available in the market. But when it comes to an actual product, you should consider various parameters like, oh, you should, I mean, I have an experience like I have built a product like I had a microcontroller ready-made available in my inventory, and we made a product out of it and we shipped into the market. And hundreds of them miserably failed due to its poor EMI intolerance, which we have never thought of. So there are a lot of things. The thing that you least expect while designing your product will be your worst nightmare when it goes to the market. So when you design a product, you should consider the worst scenario that your product will perform, or the worst scenario that your product can get out there in the market. So once you have finished designing your embedded, so once you have finished designing your embedded hardware, you can go and develop the software environment for your embedded product. You should make it a user. The same things that you have considered while developing the design should be considered while developing the firmware as well. You should make it. I mean, there are some standards when you make your products into. I mean, there are some standards when you code your embedded product for different industries. Like if you're making a product for the medical industry, there are some standards which you have to follow while you're making your code. And if you're making a product for the automotive industry, you know, we have some automotive developers in our meeting right now. So they know there are some standards you have to follow when you're developing code for an automobile environment. So these standards reduce the chances of bugs that might come when your product is out there in the market. So the same precautions that you're taking while designing the product, you have to be very careful while developing the product as well. So once you have finished developing, integrate the software and hardware, you have to test it. Test it so rigorously, so worst, and make all the worst nightmares of the product come true while you are testing the hardware. So testing is also one of the, I mean, we spend most of the time testing than we develop the product actually, because we cannot make a chance. I mean, we cannot take a chance when we release our product into the market. So we should test it so rigorously. And that's the reason why most of the embedded companies out there have a huge team independently for testing their products before letting it into the market. And once you have finished testing, it's the time to deploy it into the market. Make some field trials, You have to deploy your product into the market, get the feedback from your customers, and finally, you should give continuous support to your customers each time and every time. So these are the steps to make your embedded product come true. Moving on, I'll explain you a little bit about the available microcontroller architecture and some of the common device families that are available in the industry. So most of you, if you are electronics students, you'll be pretty much familiar with the 8051 family. So most of us, when we study engineering, that is the first thing that we study when it comes to microcontrollers, the 8051 family. So it was introduced by Intel back in 1980s, and it was one of the most popular, and it is still evergreen right after some 30 years or something. And that is one of the most popular architecture out there. And after that came up the AVR microarchitecture. So AVR was initially developed by Atmel, and as you know, it is the brain of your Arduino. Arduino is based upon enhanced AVR RISC architecture. So AVR is one of the other options which you can go, and it is pretty much advanced than the X51 architecture. We have then the PIC device family. So if somebody asks me which is the best family for a beginner to get into the world of embedded development, I would say PIC is one of the best things. So because of its, what do you call it? You will get PIC microcontrollers very cheaply around there, and all the development kits, development environment, everything is very easy to understand. And for a beginner, it is one of the best options out there. Going on, ARM right here is the big daddy of, let me say, commercial microcontroller architectures out there. So everything right now, pretty much almost 90% of the industry out here is choosing ARM for their next microarchitecture for their product, as I have seen in the industry. So that's why I have highlighted ARM as one of the best microcontroller architecture that is available. So I'm simply dividing it into two different categories. One being the legacy architectures, all the old microcontroller architecture which HAMR has introduced will come into the legacy architecture, which we have very less interest of. So we'll not be going to talk about this. We will be talking particularly about the ARM Cortex family of microcontrollers, which is one of the most widely used microcontroller architecture that is available in the market right now. So the Cortex family is primarily divided into three device families, being the Cortex M, which stands for Cortex Microcontroller Architecture. And then we have the Cortex R, which is Cortex Real-Time, especially used for real-time applications like running an OS. And sorry, do we have a question? Now in which industry, which microcontrollers? We'll have a Q&A session at the, we'll have a Q&A session at the end of the presentation. So we'll have a discussion one-to-one so that you can clear your doubts, and we'll have a discussion at the end of the session, all right? So we have the Cortex R family, which consists of real-time microcontrollers, mostly using for running RTOS and all those kind of stuff. Operating system, particularly where you need an operating system, and for a little bit kind of high performance application than the Cortex M. And the last we have the Cortex A family, which consists of all the high-end microcontrollers, and maybe the chances of having a Cortex microcontroller in your home is more than 80% right now. I mean, almost 70% of the mobile phones which you are using will be built upon the Cortex architecture, Cortex A architecture. But our point of interest will be the Cortex M architecture right here, or the Cortex microcontroller architecture. So this is one of the best available microcontroller architecture available for our commercial grade and industrial grade electronics out there. One of the most common members of the Cortex M family are the Cortex M0, M0 Plus, M4 and M7. And at the end of the session, you guys, I guarantee you guys will be able to understand the working of the Cortex M0 Plus based microcontrollers, and we are going to explain you how to write a code to blink an LED without using a single hardware abstraction layer for the Cortex M0 Plus microcontroller. Moving on, this is the usual microcontroller architecture. Let's say, I mean, I'm not pointing out any particular microcontroller, like this is the Cortex M3 architecture, this is the Cortex M7 architecture, or like that. This is something common in almost all of the modern microcontrollers. I'm not talking about the legacy microcontrollers. I'm keeping all the legacy stuff aside. We are talking about the modern stuff, okay? Cortex has been introduced in late 2008, I guess, and Cortex M0 Plus, one of the most commonly used microarchitecture, was introduced in 2012, and M4 was introduced in 2010, I guess. So let's talk about all the latest stuff which is trending in the industry right now. So this is what a usual microcontroller architecture will look like, which is, I mean, this is independent of the device family what you're looking after. Pretty much all of the microcontrollers will contain all of this stuff inside them actually. So even your Arduino will be having this kind of stuff inside. So we'll have a CPU core, which is responsible for controlling all, doing all the calculations and all those kind of stuff. Just like your a normal computer CPU, you will have a CPU core. You will have memories for storing data, for storing your program, your data, or whatever you are injecting into the memory. It will be stored over here. You will have an interrupt controller. So you guys will be wondering what an interrupt is. If you're not familiar with that, don't worry, we'll explain it. Later, moving on, we have the power section. We have the section of, this is the section of the microcontroller that is responsible for controlling the power. And also, you know, your ESP32 can live up to what you call hours or days with a very low power in it. And one of our members, Vishnu, has even made an application that will, a product using a small coin cell kind of thing that can run for even years or something. So this we do by tweaking the settings in the power module of our microcontroller. You can make it go to deep sleep, hibernation mode, low power mode, or all those kind of things that is being controlled by the power module right here. Then your microcontroller has the core clocks module. So the core acts like it is the timing signal required to run pretty much everything inside the microcontroller. So think of it as the energy block of the microcontroller or something for the simplest possible explanation available right now. So I'm not going too deep into that. That will make you confused. I mean, for an introduction to embedded system, this will be the easiest possible explanation. This will pretty much power everything. This is the reference for almost all the peripherals inside the microcontroller, the clock signals. We have the security module. We have the security module. So nowadays for IoT applications and all, you might know security is a very, pretty much a very big concern to be thought of actually. You might have heard about the great Las Vegas heist where the people, they hacked into a casino. There was a casino in Las Vegas which was running on supercomputers. I mean, they use supercomputers to make all the calculation that is required to control the gambling and all those kind of stuff. And there was a group of hackers. I don't remember the name particularly. I heard the story somewhere in a session where, I just heard the story in a session by ARM. A professional in ARM, he was explaining us about the security required in microcontrollers when we are deploying it in IoT applications. So what they did was this group of hackers, they were trying to hack into this network of computers inside this casino in Las Vegas. So what they did was their security was so tight that they weren't simply hacking into that. What they used was they found out a light bulb in one of those aquariums which was connected to the network actually. One smart light bulb was there in one of the aquariums that was inside this casino, and the Wi-Fi password or something, the credentials required to log into the company Wi-Fi was stored as a simple text file or a simple raw file which can be easily read and in an unencrypted form inside the light bulb. So they simply took out the light bulb, they reverse engineered it, they got the key credentials required to sign into that particular casino, and they hacked it like anything. So this is the importance of security when it comes to the modern product development. You can't simply deploy something without the required security. So all of the modern microcontrollers will be having cryptographic engines, cryptographic memories, or random number generator, encryption facilities, and all those things are available in all the latest microcontrollers. So that is happening inside the security module. Then you have the timers. Timers take care of one of the, pretty much almost all the, important features are taken care of by timers inside a microcontroller. Consider you want to run a periodic interrupt, you have to enable a timer. Consider you want to generate a PWM signal, you have to turn on a timer. You want to measure the width of a signal, you have to turn on the timer. And pretty much everything from simple interrupts to digital signal processing application, timers are being used in microcontrollers. So we will get into that in much more deeper form in the next slide. Then we have the analog module inside the microcontroller. You know your Arduino is capable of giving out analog signals, and if it is even capable of reading analog signals, right? So that is being done in the analog module. The analog module will house an ADC, an analog to digital converter, and at the same time it will have a digital to analog controller also. So this is capable of driving and reading analog signals inside a microcontroller. Then you have the HMI, which stands for human machine interface. Everything you require to communicate with the microcontroller and for the microcontroller to communicate with the outer world will be over here. So this consists of the general purpose inputs, outputs, and the GPIOs, and even the keyboard interrupts, those kind of stuff. So everything a microcontroller used to communicate with the outer world and we used to communicate with the microcontroller will be contained inside the HMI module. Last but not the least, we have our communication ports over here. So you guys know how to interface basic sensors, shields, and all those stuff with Arduino. So while interfacing them, you will be using some kind of method like I think you guys are familiar with interfacing UART and I2C based sensors into your Arduino or something. When you are using an RTC, a real-time clock in your Arduino application, you are interfacing it through an I2C interface. But most people know it as wire.h rather than I2C. That is one problem we have seen. They don't even know what interface is actually used while you are actually interfacing a device to the microcontroller. So that is one. That myth, we are going to bust that myth right now. We are going to understand what are actual communication protocols. So let me explain the peripherals in detail. As I told you, the memories inside a microcontroller is basically divided as flash and RAM. I'm not listing each and every peripherals out there. Actually, I'm just taking I'm just taking the most important ones out there, and I'm just going to explain the basics required to understand the peripherals of a microcontroller. So the memory inside the microcontroller is divided into flash and RAM, just like in your computer. We have a read-only memory and a random access memory. So the RAM will take care of all the dynamic data that is being handled in the microcontroller, and the flash will take care of all the fixed data which is used in, which is stored in the microcontroller. And as I've explained earlier, we have the analog module, which will have an analog to digital converter to read analog voltages and to convert it into digital values using successive approximation method or such kind of thing. And then we have a DAC, a digital to analog converter, to give you out analog signals when we are digital plottings. We come moving on to the human machine interface. As I have explained, this is used for communicating with the outer world using our general purpose input outputs and the keyboard interrupts we'll have in our microcontrollers. Then we have the timers. The timers include pulse width modulation, periodic, which is used for creating, again, if you want to analog signal out to the controller, that's the best way to generate one is using the PWM module. Then you have the periodic interrupt timer for getting periodic interrupts, or suppose if you want to execute a block of code on a periodic basis without disturbing the main routine in your code, you can use the periodic interrupt timer for running a block of code in the background of your microcontroller, but not exactly in the background, let's say in the background of the microcontroller without disturbing the main routine of your microcontroller. So that is also being achieved by the timer module. Then you have the watchdog timer right here. So a watchdog timer is, as the name suggests, it is a security feature in your microcontroller. So suppose it is something like it will watch over your code, and you have to manually reset it every time when your code runs as a routine. And if it gets stuck or hang or in between, the watchdog timer resets your entire microcontroller and the code will start running from the beginning. So it's more kind of a security feature than a user feature. Again, we are moving to communication ports. So almost all of the microcontrollers out there will be definitely having a UART, I2C, and SPI communication, and most of the modern microcontrollers also houses a USB communication port also inbuilt in that. So UART stands for Universal Asynchronous Receiving and Receiver and Transmitter, and this is one of the oldest and most popular microcontroller communication protocol out there. Then you have the I2C. I2C was founded by, it was invented by NXP back there for particularly for the industrial application, but right now I2C is pretty much everywhere. It is one of the simplest as well as the complex communication protocol out there. Simplest in the way we are just using only 2 wires out there, and it is a multi-master, multi-slave protocol, and theoretically there is no limit of the number of devices that you can connect to an I2C protocol. We'll only have practical limitations. Then we have the SPA interface, which is one of the fastest microcontroller communication protocol out there, which stands for Serial Peripheral Interface. We will get into the details in the next slides. So explaining the communication protocols, I just want you guys to be aware of the communication protocols which you will be using while interfacing a shield or a sensor to your Arduino or your development module. I mean, most of them are blindly interface. I mean, most of the people are simply blindly interfacing the sensor using the libraries provided by the community or the manufacturer without actually knowing what interface or how they are communicating each other between your microcontroller and the peripheral device. So we'll bust the myth right away. So explaining about the communication protocols right here. So a communication protocol like UART, SPA or I2C is nothing but the way or the rules that are defined for a microcontroller or a peripheral device to transfer data between each other. So there are some specific standards that are defined in the industry for the microcontrollers to, I mean, the microcontroller cannot simply send a set of bytes and expect the other system to understand it actually what he is actually meaning. So there are some protocols defined in the industry for devices to communicate each other. So I'm mentioning 2 kinds of communication protocols right here. These are the peripheral communication protocols, I'm not listing every one of them. These 3 right here, the UART, ISPA, and I2C, are the common peripheral microcontroller communication protocols, which are used to interface your microcontroller to another microcontroller or your microcontroller to a sensor device. Then we have the debugging communication protocols like the serial wire debugging, SWD, or the JTAG. So JTAG is one of the most common microcontroller protocol which is used to program and debug. So these 2 are the common communication protocols used to program and debug your microcontroller. So if you're using an ARM controller, chances are that you will be either like using a JTAG microcontroller, and if you're using a high-speed microcontroller, chances are you'll be using an SWD protocol for programming and debugging your microcontroller. So keep in mind that the UART, SPA, and I2C, peripheral communication protocols, and SWD and JTAG for debug, trace, and programming protocols. Let's explain it in a detail. So first, let us look into the UART protocol, the Universal Asynchronous Receiver Transmitter. UART is one of the, let me say, simplest and one of the most common communication protocols out there. If you have ever interfaced a GSM module or a GPS module out there, you will be familiar with UART. So most of the people know it by the pin configuration. You will have a receiver, a transmitter, and a ground as reference for the signals. So what you have to do is you'll be having a master, your MCU. You will be having a slave, which can be a module or another MCU for transferring data. So these things will interconnect the receivers and transmitters. The transmitter of the master will go to the receiver of the slave. The receiver with the transmitter of the slave will go to the receiver of the master. So this is the connection procedure for a UART protocol. The thing that you should keep in mind that this, as the name suggests, is asynchronous, which means the master and the slave has to be independently configured and synchronized manually before you initiate any communication between these 2 microcontrollers, which means if you are sending the data in a particular baud rate from your master, the same baud rate has to be set in the slave for the communication to happen properly. So as the name suggests, it is asynchronous. So this is why you are defining baud rates in your Arduino sketch or code before you actually try to connect to a UART based interface. So whenever you see a baud rate somewhere, the chances are that it is going to be a UART interface you are going to interface with your microcontroller. Moving on, this is just an introductory section, so I'll be only covering the basics. So if you want to go through the deep level concepts of microcontroller develops and all this bare metal programming, you can recommend all your suggestions at the end of the session so that we can conduct another sessions with in-depth knowledge about all these kind of communication protocols. We may conduct sessions like how to interface some particular device that happens to have some particular communication protocol. Like if you want to know how to interface any I2C based device to your microcontroller, we can do that. So please let me know that in your feedback after the session. Moving on to the I2C protocol, everybody will be familiar of the pin names right here, the SDA and SCL. So I have heard that a lot of people have been asking me when I told them about I2C, is that SDA and SCL? So that's not it is. I2C stands for Inter-IC Communication. That is Inter-Integrated Circuit Communication. That's what that is, IIC. So it is a two-wire protocol. You will be having only two wires for I2C to happen, and it is SDA and SCL, as you all know. SDA stands for the data line, and SCL stands for the clock line. So in here, you know, we are right over here, when it comes to UART, we have been using separate lines for the master to communicate with the slave, and we have a separate line for the slave to communicate with the master. But it is not the case in the I2C protocol. You have only one data line, and we'll use certain rules and timing procedures to communicate for the master to communicate with the slave and vice versa. And the clock will remain as the reference for whatever data that is being transferred from the master to the slave. And don't worry about all this in-depth stuff. We are just giving you an introduction about this thing, and we can go to the in-depth explanations of all these things in the upcoming sessions if you're conducting that. So I just want you to I just want you to be aware that if you ever come across these kind of connections in your peripherals or in your sensor modules or something, you are going to use an I2C communication, and you should be debugging it the way an I2C communication has to be debugged. The next protocol which we are going to talk about is the SPA protocol, which stands for Serial Peripheral Interface, which is one of the fastest communication protocol out there. That's why you would see it in every micro SD card modules and such kind of things out there, where speed is actually a matter. So we have, as you might have seen this thing in the micro SD card interfacing module for an Arduino. So even in SPI, it's a master-slave configuration. You will have a master microcontroller and you will have a slave device. So in SPI, you will have 4 different wires, which are being the master out, slave in, the master in, slave out, the serial clock, and the slave select. The master out, slave in is used for the master to communicate with the slave device. So this will go from the master and it will go into the slave. Always connect the master out, slave in to the master out, slave in, because you will be defining the master as slave in your firmware. And then you have the master in, slave out pin. As the name suggests, it is the input for the master and the output for the slave. So the data from master goes to the slave through this wire, and the data from the slave comes into the master through the MISO. We have the reference signal right here, the serial clock. This signal will act as the reference for all the data that is being sent to the master to slave as well as the slave to the master. So we have the timing signal, the serial clock right here. And then we have the slave select line. The slave select line will be always high for any slave that is connected to the microcontroller. So this is independent for each and every slave that is connected to SP, which means you can use the same 4 lines to connect one more microcontroller over here, and you will toggle between the slave select line of each microcontroller to communicate with each other. So again, we are not going to the in-depth explanations of all those communication protocols. I just want you to be aware of this stuff right here. So moving on, that's it about the communication protocol. So I'm going to introduce some of the development environments which you can use for if you need to really get into the microcontroller development platform. So one of the most popular and the most common and multi-vendor independent tool which we have is the Keil Microvision, which is a part of the ARM family. So you can download the Keil Microvision for free from the Keil.com. It is available. You have some limitations in the evaluation version as well, so that is fine. Then we have the IAR Embedded Workbench. This is also a very good tool for ARM-based development, and If you're going to if you're going to use a microcontroller which is based on the ARM processor, I always recommend you to use the Keel in the first place, and you will have the IAR embedded workbench in the second place. And since IAR embedded workbench needs a license and it has so much limitations in their free version, I will always recommend you to use the Keel microcontroller development platform for all your project if you're a beginner. And if you are so much keen on the open source scenario, you can always use your favorite Eclipse environment, and you can use your compiler to compile your code. So if you, I mean, I personally will not prefer Eclipse for an embedded development platform, since we have tools like IAR and Keel, which are ready-made for an embedded environment. So even if you're comfortable with your Eclipse environment, you can always use your Eclipse IDE, and you can link your compiler to get your source code generated. Sorry, to get your binary file generated. State machines or RTOS. Yeah, sure, we'll get to that. We'll get to that. Somebody's asking you to explain about RTOS. We'll explain it. We'll get to that point, sure, at the end of the session. So these three developmental environments are specifically, these three are almost cross-platform, and you can use these kind of tools to program almost every microcontroller in the planet right now. You will have SDKs or tools available for almost every microcontroller available in the field out there. And there are some IDEs which are vendor specific. I mean, the companies who are manufacturing these microcontrollers will also give you the integrated development environments, or the software specifically used can be used to develop firmware for their products, like the Freescale CodeVarrior, which can be used for developing applications upon the Freescale microcontrollers. You have the legendary MPLAB XIDE released by the Microchip company for working upon the PIC family, or even the DSP family. You have the Atmel Studio for Atmel's microcontroller, the Ultimate NXP MCU Expresso, which is one of the best IDEs out there for working upon the NXP product portfolio. So you can, I always recommend Keel for beginners if you are going to develop with the microcontroller development scenario. Moving on, if you may ask me, I'm going to move away from Arduino. I want to go beyond Arduino, and I want to learn bare metal embedded development, and I want to learn actual embedded product development, and which microcontroller should I choose? And this is the answer to that. You have various options out there. You have a lot of options to explore, and there are hundreds of microcontrollers manufacturers out there for you to try out. But I'm just listing out some of the basic things and some of the best options out there for you to try on. The first thing that, or my recommendations for all of you to try out bare metal programming microcontroller will be the NXP's Freedom series of development boards. So they are available for Cortex M0, M0 Plus, M4, and even M7 microcontrollers. So for beginners, I would recommend you to try out maybe the KL25C Freedom board, which is based on an ARM Cortex M0 M0 Plus microcontroller. So this is one of the best platform out there for learning bare metal programming, just because you will not have enough support from the community or the hardware abstraction layers. They will not provide much HALs or libraries. You have to do everything from the scratch. There is very less support. That is pretty good in one way. You can learn on your own. And coming on to the Nucleo series. The Nucleo series, you might be familiar because it is being released, it is being marketed by the ST company. And it is one of the most popular development boards out there in the even when it comes to the maker community and all. They are available for various applications, right from smaller industrial post-constraint applications, even to IoT applications, to motor drivers, industrial motor drivers, and all those kind of stuff. You will have different Nucleo boards available out there. And ST has a separate set of shields and sensor boards available for interfacing into the Nucleo series. So you just have to plug and play. You will get all the HALs, you will get all the libraries, IDEs, everything ready-made from ST. It is one of the easiest platform to learn embedded development. But I personally will not prefer learning with any kind of HALs or libraries, which will, that will almost kill your learning curve actually. You should not do that actually. You should always try to learn from the scratch. If you get a development board, do not search for the libraries or HALs available to make that board come into power. You should take the data sheet of the microcontroller, learn from the scratch. The data sheet will be your Bible, I'll tell you. If you even if you're working with a small sensor or something, the data sheet will be your Bible. So read the data sheet, be thorough with it, get to know the microcontroller, then you will be able to code. And once you get thorough with the data sheet, you will be able to do anything and everything with your microcontroller. I guarantee you, because there is more information in the microcontroller's data sheet that is there than that is there in the internet out there. So before you go out and search for a solution in the internet, look for the data sheet or the reference manual with you, and in that you might be having the answer in some what you call hard to understand format, I'll tell. So, but you will figure it out anyway. It's pretty much easy. Then you have the legacy things like the PIC development boards and the 8051 development boards, which is good for lower level application, but it's a good option to start off anyway. So you can, these are not generalized by like this Freedom series or Nucleo series. These are custom made by many local manufacturers. You will get it a cheap one for around 600 rupees or 500 rupees in 8051 development board or a PIC development board. And make sure that you buy something with a USB interface if you are going to buy one. So anyway, I will always recommend to buy either a Freedom board or a Nucleo board if you want to learn bare metal programming. So most of them are based on the ARM Cortex-M series anyway. So it is better to stick on to the Cortex-M microcontroller architecture if you're going to go real bare metal. Then we have the Cypress Pioneer series, which is one of the best BLE and IoT-based development board which I have ever used. I have a PSOC 6 BLE kit with me, and in my experience, it is one of the best when it comes to BLE and for IoT application. And it has an inbuilt Wi-Fi also, and you can see it, almost all of the Cypress and NXP Freedom boards will have a capacitive slider right here. These guys are the pioneers of capacitive sensing, and all of these boards from Cypress and NXP will have a capacitor slider for their customers to understand the smoothness of the capacitive sensing technology that they are providing. Then we have the Launchpad series of development boards from Texas Instruments, which is not much popular like the Nucleo or Freedom or Pioneer series, but they are pretty much good. They also have Cortex-M microcontrollers with them. You can also consider buying a Launchpad. So it's not, it's not that bad anyway. So anyway, I will not prefer this very much. I will prefer either the Nucleo or the Freedom. That is my preference personally. That's it. And that being said, if you are, for all these development boards, you have an USB interface right here. So if you take a closer look at the Nucleo board right here, it is being divided into two halves right here. There's a cut in the middle of the circuit. So that is because that the board itself is divided into two separate circuits, one being the programming and debugging interface right here, and one being the actual microcontroller which you'll be using to write your application upon. So this thing is a separate circuit with a separate microcontroller for you to debug and program your application into your microcontroller. So this guy will act as a spy upon this guy. He will watch upon this guy when you're running your application in debug mode, and he will be running your application. And even for the NXP, this is the father and this is your child right here, the debugging microcontroller. So you have the debugger over here and the main microcontroller over here. And this is a common thing in each and every one of them right here. You will have a separate debugger, onboard debugger, and the main microcontroller you are working upon. This will not be the case when you are going to develop a product of your own. Actually, you will not be going to design and put a debugging circuit in all of your systems. No. You will only leave the pins open for the microcontroller that is required for debugging and programming. So you will require an additional set of tools for programming and debugging your microcontrollers. So just like this part in your development boards will be broken off and will be kept as a separate tool right here. So these are just some tools that I would suggest for you to try out if you're going to really develop a product of your own. So the Kiel U-Link is one of the most common tools out there for ARM-based controllers. So if you're going to use any ARM-based controller, Keel is the best shot you have. You have the Ulink, Ulink 2, Ulink Pro, different models are out there. All of them are high-speed debuggers and programmers, and they have the best advantage when it comes to ARM-based controllers because they are directly marketed by the Keel company, who's a subsidiary of the ARM itself. Then we have the ST-Link. This is the original ST-Link available directly from the ST, that which is shown in the picture. ST-Link is used for programming and debugging STM8 and STM32 series of microcontrollers from the ST Microelectronics. You will have original as well as third-party ST-Links available in the market out there. You can try it out. We are going to have a build a product out of ST's microcontrollers. Then we have the Steger J-Link, which is also a high-performance debug and trace tool, which can be used to program, debug, and trace the activities of your ARM-based microcontrollers. Then we have the common microchip PIC-8, which is an evergreen. Right now we are at PIC-8 4th edition. So microchip PIC-8 is very commonly used by all the students, enthusiasts, and programmers out there to get the programs running in their PIC-8s. I know it is having a limited debugging capability, but still it is a very good tool for programming and debugging your embedded application if you are going to use the PIC device family or something from Microchip. So that being said, that was a brief introduction about the embedded development scenario out there. So we learned about the basic structure of an embedded system and what are the parameters consist of an embedded system. It will be having a small recap. I'm just taking a small recap, all the parameters and all those kind of stuff. We then discussed about the tools available. We discussed about the various communication protocol. We discussed about the common development boards available in the market. And now we have discussed about the common programmers and debuggers that is available for you to program and debug your microcontroller. Then now let's move on to the application style. Now, quickly, we are going to blink an LED in an ARM Cortex M0 Plus microcontroller without any prior knowledge. So let me just open the datasheet of the controller. So we'll be using an NXP Kinetis series of microcontroller, which belongs to the K04 family. So what I'm going to do is, I'm going to connect an LED. I mean, I already have a circuit out there. I already have designed a circuit, which is part of one of our products. And I'm just choosing one LED from the circuit diagram out there. I'll just show you the schematic of the circuit. And we will blink the LED using the Keel tool without using any headers, libraries, HALs, or anything out there. So I'm just stopping screen shares and I'm resharing it. Okay, so I think you guys are able to see the data sheet right now. I have the K04 subfamily. Anyone please feedback? Are you able to see the data sheet?
Yes.
Yeah, fine. So we have the K04 subfamily reference manual right here, which is the data sheet for my microcontroller, which I'm going to use for blinking an LED right now. And let me show you the schematic of the circuit, which I'm having with me right now. Okay, I have a schematic right now. Don't get scared. It is very simple. We are not bothered about much of the things happening over here. So I have an NXP MK04 Z128 K04 series microcontroller with me, which is running on ARM Cortex M0 Plus. Don't get scared about seeing all the schematics right here. It is very simple. I'm going to blink this LED right here, D19. I'll show you the actual hardware after a bit once I've explained the whole firmware process. We are going to blink the D19 LED, which is connected to the pin reference LED right here. We'll find it out over here. You can see right over here. This LED is connected to the pin 6 of the microcontroller, which is port E7. So we are going to toggle the pin port E7 to blink the LED right now with using very less software resources that is available with us. So I'm using the Keel Microvision 5 IDE with me. Let me launch it for you. That's it. We have the Keel Microvision IDE with us right now. I'm going to create a new project. a new Microvision project. I'm just going to create a new folder for saving my project. I'm giving a name for my project. Okay, once you have created your source path to your project, it will ask for the target device. Just mention the name of your microcontroller, which you are going to program upon. So we'll be using the NXP's MKE 04Z 128 kp series microcontroller. So I have selected the device. You have to, I'll explain the process of installing SDKs. I mean, I have the software development kit for this particular device pre-installed in my Keel development platform. So if you're going to use the microcontroller for the first time in the platform, there is a procedure for setting up the platform. So I thought I'll be explaining it, but due to the lack of timing, I'm really not going to explain the setup things. I mean, the setup steps for setting up your development platform. I'm just going right into the firmware development. So I have selected the pre-installed SDK that is available for the MK04Z128 microcontroller. So once I have selected the target device, it will ask for the manage runtime environment component. So here you can select what are the additional resources that you would require to run the microcontroller. So if you are going to use an RTOS, you can select it over here. So anyway, we'll not be using any RTOS, but just because we are going to code it using the Cortex standard microcontroller interface channel standard, you have to select the core component. So this stands for the Cortex. The SIMSYS is nothing but it acts like an HAL, but it is not a complete hardware abstraction layer. The SIMSYS stand between your user code and the microcontroller's lower level assembly code. So it's something like that. So you have to add the Cortex core libraries. It is something, it's not a library, it's some kind of something lower than the hardware abstraction layer. So you have to select the SIMSYS core, and also you have to go to device tab and you have to select the startup code required for the microcontroller. A startup code is nothing but an initial set of settings that is required for your microcontroller to be up and running, which you can always write on your own. If you're so badass, you can always write your startup code your own. It is not a hard thing to do, but it is better to use the recommended startup file from your microcontroller provider. So I have selected the required files for running my application. I have the device core file as well as the device startup file. That's it. Our project is created. I'll just create a C file right here. Add a new item. Right click on the source group. Add new item. All right. Choose on C file and give a name to your C file. .c. That's it. Your file is right here. So you have a blank file upon you, and you have an objective of blinking an LED without using any header files out there. How to do that? So we'll finish it in the fastest time possible. Okay. So your objective is to blink the LED D19, and right here it is connected to the port E7, PTE7. And I forgot to tell you that I know I've already explained you that we have a GPIO module, right? So GPIO is nothing but your port pins. Let it be input or output. All the pins are defined, and all the pins combined is called as GPIOs, general purpose output, input outputs. And in every microcontroller, the GPIOs will be divided as ports. Actually, each port will contain generally 8 pins or 8 GPIO pins. So your Arduino will be having port pins like D1, D2, D3 up to D13 or something. So, but here we will be representing it as port A0, port A1, A3, like that. We have up to A, B, C, D up to I in this particular microcontroller, and each port will contain 8 pins. So this is how we identify ports in the GPIO module. So right now my LED is being connected to the pin number 6, which is port E7. So this is how the microcontroller address the pin number as port E7. So my objective is to toggle the pin port E7 to blink my LED connected to this pin over here. So we'll open the data sheet for the details. Go to the data sheet, open the contents tab, fix all the crap, I will skip all the crap right there and go directly to the GPIO module, general purpose input output module. So what you understand the thing that the microcontroller is all about writing data into the memory and toggling different settings. That is the simplest way I can explain the working of a microcontroller. All you have to do is write the correct data into the correct location and you can get things done like that. So if you look into this 650 page reference manual right there, right here, all they have explained is where to write the data and what to write to get your features up and running. So it's as simple as that. You have to find, I mean, suppose I want to blink that LED. I have to write a data to some particular memory space of the microcontroller. So by reading the reference manual, I have to find out where should I write the data and what should I write to toggle our pin right there. So generally in ARM microcontroller architecture, you will be having 4 different registers, let's say 4 different registers or 4 different memory spaces for controlling your GPIO pins. That is the set output, clear output, toggle output, and the input register as well. So to make a pin high in our ARM microcontroller architecture, you have to enable a register or you have to write 1 to that particular pin's address in the port set output register. So it's I'm not making it very complicated. It's just as simple as if you want to set a pin high, go to the set output register and make it high. If you want to clear a pin, if you want to make the value of a pin 0, go to the clear output register and write 1 to that register. That pin will be cleared. And if you want to toggle a register, go to the toggle register, toggle a pin, go to the toggle register of that particular pin, write 1 into the register, and that pin will be toggled. So it is as simple as that. So let us, my objective right now is to blink the thing. And so I want to set the output, make it high, give some delay, and then I need to turn down the output. So I need to clear the output. So I need to do this again and again and again. So I need to find out the port set register and the port clear register. So I'm looking into the data sheet to find the memory map. Yes, it's over here. So it is explained that all the GPIO registers could be accessed either by using base address of, this is hexadecimal. As you all know, this is an hexadecimal number. All the hexadecimal numbers are represented by a predecessor 0 crores. You should read it as 0 crores. And this right here is a 32-bit hexadecimal address right now. So all the GPIO registers can be accessed by the address, base address, this particular one. But I need the register address for that particular pin right there. So if you look into that, our LED is connected to port E7 right here. So I need to find out where should I write my data to get that thing up and running. So look into the register assignments table. We have a table right here, which is a list of all the pins out there. And the pin I'm looking for is the port E7 right here. So I need to toggle this particular pin right here, which is the 7th bit of the GPIO B section. This is a module actually. The entire GPIO pins are divided as 3 particular modules right here, each with 32 bits. So my pin, the port E7, it is located at the 7th bit of the GPIO B register or the GPIO B module. It is located at the 7th bit of GPIO B module. Now I know where to write the data. It has to be written in the 7th bit. Whatever operation that has to be carried on to the port E7 has to be written on the 7th bit of that particular register out there. Suppose I want to set the pin high, I should go to the port set register of GPIO B and I should set the 7th bit in that particular register. So again, I'll go to the memory map. I told you there is a set register. So our pin is located at the GPIO B module. We'll go to the GPIO B module out there. So these are the GPIO B modules, GPIO B port data output register, that is PDOR, port set output register. So we have found out the set output register. then this register is used to write a high signal into that port. So if you need to turn on the port E7, if you want to make the port 7 high, you need to write the value 1 into the 7th bit of the port set output register of GPIO B, since our pin is located in GPIO B. So before doing that, how do the microcontroller know whether we are going to use that pin as an input or an output? Even in Arduino programming, we are defining it before using a pin, right? You are going to define whether it is an input or output. So for that, we have a register called data direction. So that is the first thing that I'm going to do. I need to define whether the pin is going to be used as an input or an output. So we have the port data direction register, PDDR, right here, which belongs to the GPIO B module, and the memory address for that one right here is over here. I have a 32-bit address right here, 400FF054. So the first thing what I'm going to do is I'll go to my code. I'll go to my Keel platform right here. I'll just define a pointer, like I'll just define a pointer to that particular address right there. So it's like define. I'm just defining a pointer with the name GPIO-B PDDR, a 32-bit pointer address that will point to the address 0x40FF054. So this pointer right here will point to this particular address, which belongs to the GPIO-B data direction register right here. As you can see, that pointer will point to this particular address. So if I write to the 7th bit from this address, I am going to enable the port E7's output. So you need to write 1 to that register to enable it as an output pin over there. So we have already, so right now we have defined the pointer to write to the address of this particular data direction register to enable the pin as an output. So this is similar to your Arduino code where you set pin output. I mean, you do that, right? You have to set a pin as either an input or output. So instead of doing that, you will be defining the address of the register where you have to set the pin high or set the bit high for turning the system into an turning the pin into an output mode. You need 2 more registers. You have the data directions register for setting it as an either an input or an output. You need to find out the set output register for the GPIO B module. Yeah, it's over here. GPIO B port set output register, and it is located at 400FF044. So next time we are going to define a pointer to that particular address, and yep. I have defined a pointer named GPIO-B port set output register, and I have defined the name, sorry, the address over here. The same way I have found out the address for the clear output register as well. So you define a pointer to the clear output register the same way we have done for the data direction and the set output. So as it is being done, this is more than enough for us to blink our LED. Our LED is now connected to the 7th bit. Remember that our LED is connected to 7th bit of the GPIO-B module. Now I am writing my code right here. So you write your main function, and to the data direction register you have already defined, you should copy the value. You should write 1 to the 7th bit. So what I have just done is I went to the data direction register. So your GPIO-B PDDR is pointing to this particular address in the microcontroller. So it will come over here. It will come over to here like this. You are pointing to this particular address right here. Then you are shifting it 7 bits to the left. So your data will come up to 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 right here to the pin which you have connected to your LED, the port E7. So what you have just done is you have written 1 to the port data direction register, which will make the pin an output right here. So that is being done. So what you will do next is you have to write an infinite loop as of now. Where you have to write to the set output register to make the pin high. So this is my set output register right now. So this thing will point to the memory address right here, and from that memory address I am shifting 7 bits to the left. So what I'm just doing is the same thing. I know the 7th bit is my pin that is being connected to the LED. I'm writing 1 to the set output register, which will in turn turn on that particular pin. And then we need a delay, but I'm not using any header files right now. So how I'm going to define a delay right here? The only way is you have to write a for loop which will run for some particular time without doing anything inside the code. So this is called as a software delay. I'm just simply defining something. Some rough value right here. This has to be calibrated. I'm just keeping it a little bit more since the clock frequency of microcontroller is pretty high for ours. We are using a 48 megahertz microcontroller. So this is an enough loop for us. I mean, this will run for this much operation cycles without doing anything in the code, which will act as a software delay for our application. So I have written the set output register right now. So what the until now what this code does is you have set the data direction of the 7th pin to output. It is just like defining the pin as output. Then you have enabled the pin high over here. You have written the 7th bit from this particular memory address of the set output register, and then you have defined a delay. Since you have already turned on the pin, to blink an LED, you have to turn it off. This is the for turning the pin off, you have to write 1 to the 7th bit of the clear output register right here. So you have selected the register from the data sheet. You know that this register is used to clear the output from the pin output. And in order to clear the output of the 7th pin in our microcontroller, you have to turn on the 7th bit of that register. That is exactly what we are doing right here. This particular pointer is pointing to the memory register of the port clear output register, and it is turning on the 7th pin over here. And we are placing the same delay again for simulating a blink. That's it, guys. So this is all that is required for you to blink an LED in a bare metal programming. I'll explain the code once again very quickly. So with respect to the data sheet, what we have over here, you need to blink an LED which is connected to some particular pin of your microcontroller. Find out the pin in your data sheets GPIO module. Find out the location of the pin where it is being done. And my pin is right here at port E7, the 7th position of my GPIO B module. Once you have, this is common for all the ARM Cortex or microarchitecture. If you look into the basic structure of all ARM Cortex M series of microcontroller, this particular way of addressing GPIOs is common to every ARM Cortex M microcontrollers. So you have found out the position, the bit position of your pin right here and the module name right here. Then in every ARM architecture, you need to define the data direction. So you have browsed to the data sheet to find out the register which is used to set the data direction of your pin, the GPIO B modules, port data direction register, which is located at this particular address. You have defined a pointer which points to that particular address for you to access that register. Then for setting the pin output, you need to find out the port set output register of your GPIO B module. You have found out the memory address, the absolute memory address of that particular register. you have defined another pointer to access that particular register to set the output of your pin. Again, you need to clear the output right now, and for clearing the output, you will find out the port clear output register of the GPIO B module. You have found out the absolute hex address to accessing that register. You have defined a pointer in your C program to pointing to that particular address right here. So now you have the references for accessing each one of those addresses out there in your microcontroller. Then you are going to write your code. First of all, you are writing one, and always use an OR while writing to a register if you're not intending to erase what it is already in there. So it is a logical OR operation. So when you are OR equaling a value into a register, it will only superimpose the newly added value into the register, and it will not erase anything that is already in the register. So this is a good practice which you can follow if you only want to write this particular value into the register. So what you're doing right here is you are declaring the data direction of that particular pin as output right here. So you know your pin lies in the 7th bit. So the 7th bit of this particular register is 1 right now. You have written 1 unary operator, which is a standard for your compiler. We are not going into in-depth about it. So you are simply writing 1 to the 7th position of your GPIO B PDDR data direction register, which will enable the pin as an output. Then you are going to write an infinite loop to blink your LEDs. So what you're going to do will be what you need to do will be you have to find out the memory address of the PSR, the set output register, and turn on the 7th bit of that register. So this will turn on the pin in the microcontroller. You have defined a delay for you to see the actual blinking take place. If you don't declare a delay, you will simply see a high speed, high frequency blinking, which is not visible for your eyes. So delay is required for you to see the blinking actually. Then you need to turn off the pin. For turning off the pin, use the port clear output register. Write 1 to the 7th position, which represent your pin out there. So your pointer is what you're actually doing is you are using this pointer to access the memory address of the port clear output register, and then you are writing 1 to the 7th position, which holds the position of your pin inside the microcontroller. So this will clear the output in the pin. So as of now, according to theory, the microcontroller recognizes that the pin is an output. The microcontroller knows when to turn on the pin. It will wait for this loop to turn over, and then it will again turn off the pin, and it will again wait for the loop to be executed. So this is enough for a bare metal blink. We haven't used any libraries or anything. We are just using the standard SimSync source code, and all the default settings is actually settings in the set inside the microcontroller. If you look at the old series of microcontroller like the Pico 8051, you need to manually do some settings or startup code to get your microcontroller up and running. It is not required in the Cortex series actually. You will have the default settings already set in your microcontroller when you get it from the manufacturer, or when you first compile your code using the SDK. All the device settings will be written to the microcontroller by the startup code which you have. So you don't have to worry about all the initialization code. It is already there in the startup code. But I'm not telling that, I mean, that is not an hardware abstraction layer or a library. We are not using any libraries right here. You are directly writing a value to a memory address in your microcontroller. That will in turn trigger a hardware action in your microcontroller right here. So let's go on and compile the code. That's it. Don't worry about the one warning right here. It is because of the lack of a space in the last line. Yeah, we have compiled the code with 0 errors and 0 warnings right now. So now we are going to upload it to our microcontroller to see whether our LED is blinking or not. And my friend Amal, I think he's online with us. Amal will be having the hardware, and he will demonstrate to you he will upload the code. I'll just share the code to Amal right here. Amal will upload the code to the microcontroller which we'll be having, and it will demonstrate you the blinking of the microcontroller. Over to Amal right now. Amal, can you share your screen? I'll just stop sharing right now. Amal, can you share your screen right now? Yep. So Amal has already shared the screen. As you can see, that same things what I have already told you is already there. the microcontroller is connected. Amal, can you please turn on your camera and show the audience our microcontroller or the board which we are using, the MK, the NXP controller, and also please turn on your camera. Amal, I'm not able to see. Yeah, guys, if you please choose Amal Matthew in the list of participants, you can see the Amal. Can you show the microcontroller right there in the back of the board right there? We have a custom design board right here. We have designed it for an industrial application. Please a little bit left to the camera. Yeah, you can see the 80-pin microcontroller right there. It is an NXP MK04 microcontroller which belongs to the Cortex M0 Plus family. And so we'll be using an SWD interface to Ulink 2 debug tool to write this program into this microcontroller. Amal, can you show the Ulink 2 debugger to our friends? Yeah, so we have the Keel Ulink 2, which is a tool that is directly manufactured by the ARM company. So we'll be using the Ulink 2 and the SWD interface to program this thing into our microcontroller. Yep, that's enough. Amal, so can you connect the debug tool to the microcontroller? You can connect it and please share your screen. Once you're connected, I'll explain the process of dumping the code into the microcontroller. Please connect it and show them the connection. Show the connection on the back of it actually. So you have already dumped the code. All right, fine. So the debugger is connected. Please share your screen and I'll request remote control to that right now. I think I'll be able to control it remotely. Yeah. Please share your screen. I'm requesting remote control to your screen. Please enable that. Yeah. So now I have remote control over Amal system. So this is the same code which I've explained to you a few minutes ago. So we have defined all the registers which is required to access the microcontroller's GPIO inputs, and I'm not going to explain it again. This code is right here for blinking your LED. So I'm going to compile it once again. There is no error. So this button right here is your debug interface, which is used to debug your microcontroller. But I thought of explaining it to your friends about how to debug your microcontroller and how to see the stuff that is actually working inside the microcontroller. But due to time limitation, I'm not going into the details of the debug window right here. But when I click here, you will get a warning that we are running on the evaluation mode of Keel. You have a code size limit of 32 kilobytes. So which if you are going to buy the free version, if you're going to get the free version of the code, you can only compile up to 32 kilobytes of code, which is pretty much more than enough for any of your bare metal applications, which we are going to, and even for learning about the embedded development, this is pretty much more than enough. So I'll click OK. So this will dump the code. Your controller is now programmed and it is ready to be executed. So we have the run button over here. The moment I press run, the controller will start running the code inside it. So I thought of explaining a lot more about the debug screen right here, but because of time limitations, I'm just going straight into the program execution. So if you are very much interested about learning more about bare metal programming and embedded development, we'll go more in depth about these concepts in our upcoming sessions. So that's entirely up to your interest actually. So I'm running the code right here. And I have a watch window over here. So this window over here is actually showing the state of our GPIO-B register. And if you go to the PDOR, which stands for Port Data Output Register, and if I expand the register, you can actually see that in the 7th bit, the logic level is being toggled based on the program right here. So you can see GPIO BPSOR is being set. After a second, it is being cleared by this particular code right here. And the data output register is showing the blink without any hardware. I mean, you're able to simulate this actually. I'll teach you about the simulation maybe another day. Amal, can you stop screen sharing and show them the hardware, the blinking? I'll exit from the debug screen so that it should be easy for you. Amal, can you hear me, Amal? Hello? Amal, can you stop sharing screen and you please explain the, yeah. Can you please show us the hardware? If you can switch to Amal Matthews' name in the list of participants, you can see the hardware. Yes, our LED is blinking right there. So you guys may think that that's a lot of code to just blink an LED. You are writing around 5 to 10 lines of code. So keep in mind that you are not using any single library or any single hardware abstraction layer right now. You are directly writing to the memory of your microcontroller. You are just, what do you call, for this application you are just writing 1 to just 3 of the registers. You are just writing 3 bits of data into your microcontroller to enable any blink. Just 3 bits of data. One bit of data to the PDD or data direction register, another bit of data to the set output register, and one single bit of data to the clear output register. So only 3 writes are required for you to turn on an LED. And nowadays even this is not required for you to, what do you call, for making an embedded application. Actually, all these manufacturers are providing you with HALs and all those kind of stuff. Can you show the microcontroller back over there? Just flip over the board. Flip over the board. You can remove the debugger. You can remove the debugger. Yeah, you see that there. We have an 80-pin microcontroller right there. So it's as simple as that. We have a normal microcontroller, a commercial grade, to be precise. It's a commercial grade microcontroller from NXP microcontrollers, and we have simply made it blink an LED without using anything at all. Simply we wrote a couple of lines of code in the keel, and it's as it is. It's as simply as that. I mean, a lot of people think that bare metal programming is so hard, and I'm not able to understand anything. It is as simple as that. You just need to learn how to read the data sheet. Actually, the data sheet is your Bible. I told you that you have more information in the reference manual and data sheet than that is available in the internet. So if you're able to grasp the things in the database, and if you're able to find out where to write and what to write, that is more than enough for you to develop your own embedded product. It is as easy as that. All of the features in your microcontroller can be toggled and controlled just by writing the same way which we have written all into the microcontroller right now. You need to define a pointer to the address which you are going to write, and actually you don't have to do it. Actually, I mean, if you are using the device header families and all those things, all these pointers are predefined. You don't have to do this. Actually, you just have to by heart the name of these pointers, and you will be done in a minute. Actually, you don't have to declare all these pointers, addresses, and all those stuff. It will be predefined in your microcontrollers library and all this device headers and all those stuff. So that's it, Amal. You can stop sharing the screen. Yeah. Again, I am taking over. So that's with the blink. That's how we blink an LED bare metal in a microcontroller, and you can use the same procedure to do whatever you want in any microcontroller out there in the planet. And if you follow the same procedure, learn the data sheet, find out where to write and what to write, you will be able to do whatever you want in any one of the microcontroller. So with that, I'm concluding my session. Please shoot me if you have any questions right now, and so that we are already out of the time limit. Yes.
Hello, sir.
Yeah,
Hello?
tell me, sir, please.
So there was few questions in the chat section.
Yes, I was not able to see that since I was presenting right here. You can shoot right away.
Yeah, I will shoot that. So first one was asked by Ramnath.
Yeah.
So he asked to us, in industry, which microcontroller is being used now, which is preferred more.
All right. So okay, I'll answer it one by one right now. Okay. So I've already explained you in my first slide right here, right there, that when I introduced you the semiconductor industry. See, these are the most common microcontroller manufacturing companies out there when we go to the embedded field. And when I explained it, I've already told you that the microcontroller is preferred based on the application. It's not like what you call one particular microcontroller is used in the entire industry. When it comes to automobile electronics, when it comes to developing automobile electronics, mostly NXP is leading the market, followed by Renesas and Infineon. Most of them will be based on the ARM Cortex-M architecture. Or if it is something like an infotainment application or something that demands real-time rendering, you will be using a Cortex R-based microcontroller from any of these manufacturers, or in Cortex A-based processor or microcontroller if it is a much more power demanding thing. So that entirely depends upon the application which you will be using. ST is commonly used in commercial and power electronics application. When it comes to power electronics, motor control, and commercial application, ST is most preferably chosen by most of our manufacturers. And if it is a cost constrained application, if you want to develop a commercial product with a cost constrained application, you can go for Nuvoton or Microchip for cost constrained application, and always for Cypress is very good for IoT. I mean, all these things as even STM32L4 is also good for IoT, and Cypress is one of the best when it compared to capacitive sensing and all those kind of stuff. You can always choose one of them, and that's it. The choice of microcontroller is always based upon the application, and in various industries it varies actually. And these are just some examples. Yeah.
Yeah, hello.
Yes, tell me.
Yeah, he seems to write quite a lot of questions in the chat section.
All right.
Yeah, like difference between timer and counter.
All right.
Then automatic school bell, which timer is used.
All right.
Then ARM Cortex series is microprocessor or microcontroller.
Okay, fine.
Okay.
So, all right, fine, definitely. So I'll just try to do this. I'll just try to give an answer as brief as possible without taking much time, since we are already out of time. So difference between a timer and the counter, it is very simple. A timer is nothing but a counter itself. So it will just count something in a set frequency. So what it is doing is, what is meant by a timer actually? It keeps track of the timer, right? So if you want to create a 1 second timer, what you will be doing is, suppose you have a microcontroller which that is running at some particular speed, right? I'm trying to explain it as simple as possible. If you have a microcontroller, it is running at some particular speed. It is executing instructions some particular speed. You have all the megahertz and gigahertz out there, right? So what you will be doing is, you will turn, a timer is nothing but a counter where you will set a limit to the counter and will find out the time that the microcontroller takes to count up to that value. Which means, suppose if your microcontroller is capable of counting up to say some 10 lakh or something in 1 second, and if you want to create a 1 second timer, what you are doing is actually you are letting your microcontroller count up to 10 lakh every time, so that you will get to know that every time it comes, it takes, the clock speed of the microcontroller from your data sheet. You know the speed at which your microcontroller is going to perform instructions. So from that, you are going to set a counter, and you will just put the counter's what you call upper limit, or the counter's mode value. That's what we call professionally the counter's overflow value. And you will, suppose you need to create a 1 second timer. You are just going to create a counter that is going to count to the value that the microcontroller can count in 1 second. So a counter is nothing but a timer is nothing but a counter itself. There is not. A timer is nothing but a counter that is calibrated particularly to that value which is required to which is in par with the time limit that you want, or the frequency that you want to set in the timer. So when you define a timer, what you are going to do is, you are simply defining a counter that overflows at a frequency in which that you want your timer to operate. That's all.
Okay, thank you, sir. Next, we will be asking questions from Anand Krishna.
Yep.
Anit Krishnan, he has raised his hand. Anit Krish, are you online?
Yes. Am I audible?
Sure, you're audible. Please.
Yeah, okay. From the perspective of a beginner, I have a question.
Sure.
See, you said that we have to set the PDDR as 1 for output and 0 for input, isn't it?
Yes.
And similarly, we will have to set the registers PSOR and PCOR, isn't it?
Yes, it is.
So, from a beginner's perspective, how is he supposed to know that these are the registers which we have to modify
Yeah.
in order to do such a task?
Yes, sure. So actually, I was planning to give us much more, what do you call, briefer introduction about reading data sheets and finding out these particular values inside the data sheet. But since the time was not permitting me, I was going directly into the explanation. So all these things are readily available in the data sheet. That's what I told you. There is more information in the 650-page data sheet of your microcontroller than there in the internet about your microcontroller. So everything that you need to know about your microcontroller, it's there in the data sheet. Suppose you definitely know that you need to toggle an LED, right? So you will go to the general purpose input output section of your data sheet. That's how we read the data sheet. Your application, it's to toggle an input output, to toggle an output. So you go to the general purpose input output data sheet. It is pretty much obvious that this is where you need to go into the data sheet, and you read the data sheet. As long as you read over it, you will find out that when you reach your particular register's value, you can see that when I see, I told you that you need to set in the particular register to do a particular operation. So when you go through the data sheet, you can find out that it is clearly defined that what each register does to the microcontroller. So the port set output register, or PSOR, that clearly defines that when you write a 0, sorry, I'm going to, it is PDOR, I'm going to, yeah, let's go to PCOR, the port clear register. If you write 0 to the register corresponding between PDO, the data register does not seed. And if you write 1 to the PCOR register, clear output register, corresponding bit in the data register is cleared to 0, which is clearly updated over here. And if that is the same thing when it comes to the every other register. You have asked me about the data direction register. Go to the definition of the port data direction register in the data sheet, and it is clearly defined that what it does when we write 0 and 1 to the particular bit of the PDDR register. Writing a 0 configures the pin as a general purpose input for the GPIO function, and writing a 1 will be configuring the pin as an output for the GPIO function. So it is already defined in the data sheet. So because of the time limit, I was not able to explain all this stuff to guys. I was forced to go right into the execution stage. So this is how you do that actually. As a beginner, you have to read the data sheet. You have to find out. I mean, that is the only reference you have. So that's how we do that.
Okay. I think this might be the main reason why many of the beginners stay away from
Exactly.
Programming microcontrollers like this.
Exactly, because they find it difficult to read data sheet. Actually, reading data sheet, I mean, browsing through the data sheet and finding out the actual information that you require to your application that's a skill itself actually. So I mean, we can explain that in our upcoming sessions, how to browse through the data sheet and find out the application. It is pretty much easy, right?
I think that will be beneficial. Apart from that of the microcontrollers, I think maybe component level data sheet interpretation might also help at some point.
Yes, definitely. That's a skill that is very important to all of our developers out there. So we'll discuss about that in our upcoming session. So
all right. Thank you very much.
Yeah.
Hello, sir.
Yes.
Hello. Yeah, we will be having one more question.
Sure.
Rest of the questions will be answered in our forum.
Sure.
The question will be asked by Rafi. Rafi, are you online?
Yeah.
Please.
Okay. You are told that there are some board like ST and NXP like that.
Yes.
So in STM32 and NXP also they are supporting Arduino and MicroPython, then embedded C.
What do you mean by they support Arduino? I mean,
means Arduino language and MicroPython language.
Yeah.
Embedded C. So how we are choosing such languages for microcontroller? Is there any rule for choosing languages?
As soon as embedded development is concerned, the language is only a barrier between you and the machine. Anyway, your compiler is going to convert it to binary when you're programming into the microcontroller. So it doesn't matter which language you are going to program. It's a comfort of the developer actually. So a language is nothing but the way to understand the barrier between the compiler and the user, nothing else. Every compiler will turn it into machine code. Once you compile the code, it will be turned back into machine code. But the most flexible language as of now is always embedded C. I always recommend everybody to follow C and bare metal C. If you look at the code which we have written right now, I'll post it on our community. It is pure C. I mean, there is no, we don't have a single statement that is out of the standard C structure out there. It is pure C code. So I always recommend C. That is the most flexible language for you to write an application upon microcontroller. MicroPython, it still have some dependency issues, and it is not at all recommended for high-end applications, like pure industrial application, because of this dependency issues, because we will be using a lot of other libraries and even the native libraries of microcontrollers. But when it comes to real embedded development as a product, you cannot trust the code that you didn't create. So it is better not to use any libraries. You can never trust the code that you didn't create. So it is always best to write directly into your microcontroller and do not use any libraries in between you. So it's always best to use the embedded C platform to writing code into your microcontroller.
Okay, thank you.
Do we have any more questions?
The rest of the questions can be answered in our community forum. We have already exhausted our time limit.
All right, sure.
Are there any more questions? Yes,
Sure.
Ramnath has
So,
one.
so this session, what we have planned is just as an, an introductory section to the world, just for demystifying the myths and all the stuff that regarding the embedded development. Actually, we are not going too deep into the core concepts. Like Mr. Vamsi has already asked about CMSIS. What is CMSIS and how to code upon CMSIS, the Cortex Microcontroller Software Interface Standard, which is a core topic itself, actually. So we might have to discuss about it when we are going to actually having a much more deeper discussions on embedded development, because this was just the main intention of this session was to just to give you a head start. I just want you to get yourself aware of the options that you have other than Arduino. And as you all know, the steps you need to take when you want to make your product from a prototype to a complete product. So I just want to make you guys aware of the structure of an embedded system, the basic stuff that is going inside the system, and the basic structure of the microcontroller program, and writing code for your microcontroller without depending upon any library out there. The code which we have written right here, we haven't depended on anybody. We haven't depended on a second person. We haven't depended on the code created by another person. This code is purely yours. You are directly writing into pure silicon out there. So that is how you have to create a product out there. You don't have to depend upon a secondary code. Right from the scratch, you cannot trust the code you didn't create. I'm telling it again and again, because I've been doing a project for the maker community for quite a few years. I'm not active right now since I've been working in the industry. So a few years back, right around 3 to 4 years back, I've been posting regularly on maker communities such as Instructables and Axter. And every day I used to get emails like how to change the code like that, how to change the code like this. Your code is not working on my system and it is working in some other time. Yesterday it was working, today it is not working. So this has to be changed. You cannot trust the code you didn't create. So get to know your hardware. It is easy. Embedded development is easy, just like turning on a switch. That's what you just did. You just turned on a switch in a resistor. So it's easy as that. So for you, just find out which switch to turn on and what to turn on. That's it, job done. And do not depend upon other people's code. Create your own code, write it from the scratch, work upon pure silicon. That's the best feeling you will get ever. So that's the way you need to develop products as a maker. Make it yourself, actually. Do not rely upon libraries or other things, other kind of stuff. Make it yourself. That's the best thing you need to know. You will get a better understanding of your microcontroller. You will get better debugging capabilities. You will get to know your microcontroller better than everyone. You will not have any limits if you are coding on bare metal, actually. You can get the maximum out of your microcontroller by directly directly programming to pure silicon out there. That is the best way to get the maximum juice out of your microcontroller. And that's the way it has to be done, seriously telling. And the sense of satisfaction that you get when you write a code 100% of your own, I'm telling you guys, there is nothing like that actually. So this is how embedded development has to be done. And this is the way electronics are programmed all around in the world, right from a small commercial electronic product to a military equipment out there. Everything is programmed this way because you cannot stand a chance where your code is dependent upon some other's code or some other library or API, and you cannot guarantee the functionality of those things. So everything is coded from the scratch, from the beginning, and all of you guys should be aware of that to create a product of your own. Because next day, today, tomorrow, you might have the idea of creating a product for the society, but you have to, your product should be capable of withstanding in the market actually. It should be capable of what you call it, it should be of quality actually. I mean, we should not be like, we should put something like building Legos. We'll put some code from there, we'll copy some code from there, we'll join all together, and then we'll create a product like that. It's not the way it has to be done. You should have complete control over your code, and that's how it has to be done. So that's all about bare metal programming from my side. So that's it, guys. Thank you so much. Please mention your feedbacks on the community, so that will help me and also others to improve. And it's been a while since I have presented a session, so I had some issues with my headset. It's been a while since for me also. I used to do this before, but not anytime soon. So thank you all. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Prashant, for the informative session. We all will be looking forward for a second session, which will be a follow-up, I believe. Thank you for everyone for joining the session. Please fill the feedback form, and also you can ask your doubts and clarify it in our community forum. Once again, thank you everyone.